Following program are pre-recorded.
Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Good morning and a happy Wednesday, folks. It's Tuesday, November 6th. My name is Jason Spieth, sitting in for Steve Bakken here today on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. And how are you doing today? Did you have a good election day yesterday? Taking a look at some of the different presidential, statewide, local bills, referendums. Donald Trump wins North Dakota. As many of you already know, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, according to many reports that are being reported across the country. Oh, I see Nick Begich went back into the Alaska U.S. House race. Sorry, I'm looking across some of the different races and everything. And Nick Begich, I've interviewed him before in the past, a number of years ago on a energy project they're doing there in Alaska. Nice fella. His father is the one that went down in the airplane. Something along those lines. Had some sort of mysterious family death like in Minnesota, Paul Wellstone. But I digress. We should go ahead and take a look at some of the election results, folks. What's going on there? Statewide turnout. 371,000 voters, according to the ND website of SOS, Secretary of State. Something along the lines of 594,000 eligible voters, whereas 371,000 turned out, 62% checked in. And when we take a look at a lot of the different races that happened across the states and nation, local, we're going to go ahead and start with some of the statewide measures here. Get on that in just a second here, but Measure 1 related to terminology describing public institutions. The yes vote got 84% and the no vote got 15%. Honestly, I'm not even sure what that is all about. I did not read that one time. So this is more reporting than it is analyzing when it comes to that. Related to spending and transfers from the Legacy Fund. Oh, this one's interesting. Yes got 52% of the vote, whereas no got 48% of the vote. That's interesting. That one we're going to be keeping an eye on, folks. We will be keeping an eye on Measure 2. Related to the spending and transfers from the Legacy Fund. Measure 3, related to prohibiting all political subdivisions from levying any tax on real property except bonded indebtedness until paid. Boy, that is just flows off the tongue. Yes got 36%, no got a 64% on that particular, related to prohibiting all political subdivisions from levying any tax on real property except for bonded indebtedness until paid. All right. Measure 5, related to the legislation of cannabis and related regulation. The no votes win at 53%, and the yes votes got a 57%. Look at that. So North Dakota does not pass legalized recreational cannabis. That is interesting, folks. We are going to talk about that one as well. Talk about the property tax measure. You know what dawned on me more than anything, and we'll talk about Measure 5, the cannabis one, when we come back a little bit more full in depth, because I really want to talk about that particular one. It's interesting how when you look at the different county breakdowns, Cass and Grand Forks overwhelmingly voted yes. And then Williams County was the other one. And then the rest of the counties pretty much voted no. Very interesting to me. But when we take a look at the property tax bill, there's so many things that are interesting about this property tax measure. from the elimination of it to the actual wording. This bill would essentially eliminate property taxes. Look at what your state representatives have done to the English language so you are confused when you go to the voting booth. So you have absolutely no idea what you're voting for. Listen to this. Related to prohibiting all political subdivisions from levying any tax on real property except for bonded indebtedness until paid. What does that even mean? In all honesty, go read that statement to 100 people in any office building. I'm not even talking about on the street. Heck, you can go to a political party, like an actual where they have drinks and appetizers, and read that statement. I bet you 100 out of 100 do not understand what you're talking about. That is so complex to say eliminate property tax. Think of how far we've gone with the same group of people using language like that to continue to confuse you so they can say, I know what's best. I'm going to go make the changes so that you don't know what the changes are. So now that you're confused and you need help with those changes, well, you have to rely on me. That's what this measure represents to me. When you take a look at who was for keeping property taxes, it's everybody who directly benefits from it. So it's your elected officials, it's big companies and corporations, I don't even see anybody from the schools come out. All I saw were business owners who directly benefit from government subsidies, and politicians and lobbyists come out and say, no, we cannot eliminate property taxes. And that's who runs your economy. That's who runs your legislative process, to where they have to confuse and manipulate the English language so much so you have to rely on them no matter what. Folks, when we come back, we're going to talk about Measure 5, how that failed as well, the passing of recreational cannabis. Plus, we have to read, I haven't even gotten into who won and who lost in Burleigh County and Bismarck dog catcher and whatever else they had on the ballot this year. So my name is Jason Spees. I'm sitting in for Steve Bakken, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in for Steve Bakken here, day after the election. Just kind of going through some of the results and talking about the different measures, statewide measures, some of the different races, etc. Of course, U.S. Senate, Kevin Cramer got 66% of the vote. Katrina Christensen from the Democratic Party got about 34% of the vote. Not much of a race there, folks. And so we can expect more of the same from North Dakota. That bridge will continue to be built back to the 18th century. We can expect more of that. We can expect more of your politicians trying to eliminate your property rights. We can expect more of your politicians increasing your taxes. We can expect more of your politicians trying to tell you how to live in your personal life. And we can expect more growth in government based on yesterday's election. As I mentioned, U.S. Senator Kevin Cramer wins the U.S. Senate. Kelly Armstrong got 68% of the vote. Miro Pepgord only got 26%. Michael Coachman comes in with about a 5%. Miro Pepgord, I actually thought you would do better. I really did. I thought you'd crack 100,000 votes and give Kelly a little bit of a run for the money. Most Republicans historically get 63%. And so Kevin Cramer getting 65%, Kelly Armstrong getting 68% is showing that the Republicans in North Dakota are increasing their lead when it comes to just standard votes. Look, I mean, Julie Fedorchak, she got 69% against Trygve Hammer. How did they not use that name? How did they not have a hammer? I mean, Trygve Hammer, how did you not go viral because you were so damn fun? In all seriousness. I mean, politics aside, Julie Fedorchak sat as a authority figure on one of the biggest carbon projects on the planet. And that's a conflict of interest. Yes, she did recuse herself, sure, but she still owns the property. And when she brought the property was after the state knew that that existed. So with all of the conflicts of interest, all of the legitimate questions surrounding Carbon Summit Solutions pipeline, Julie Fedorchak, the timeline, and your name is Trygve Hammer, and you get your butt kicked that much? Like I said, North Dakota, more of the same. More of that building of the bridge back to the 18th century. I mean, Doug Burgum did a fantastic job doing that, building his banana republic. And now after this election, more people are in place so that North Dakota can become the banana republic that the globalists want. And people like Senator John Hoeven can control every single one of you. Kevin Kramer can control every single one of you. Kelly Armstrong now going to be the governor. We'll see what he does with commerce. See if he continues to use the Department of Commerce as a weapon, just like Senator Hoeven and Governor Burgum did when they were in charge. Remember, Senator Hoeven started the Department of Commerce in North Dakota. And take a look at what he did with that. Take a look at who got money, who got projects, and then go look at where they bank. And then ask yourself, was that in the best interest of the state or a very small group of people? Because for 25 years, the same formula, the same business model has been happening. Why do you think Doug Burgum did what he did? He disrupted the Hoeven machine. He said he was going to drain the swamp. He did no such thing. Doug Burgum just dug another one. North Dakota is literally two swamps of ugly politics. And every now and then you've got people that go from Doug Burgum's swamp over to Hoeven's swamp and vice versa. And if you disagree with me, come on the program. Come on the program. Let's talk about it. Let's not yell about it. Let's not finger point about it. Let's not shame each other. Let's actually talk about it. Because I'm well aware the majority of the individuals involved, number one, they're not professional enough, they're not ethical enough, and they're not smart enough to have a conversation like this. The only thing they know how to do is steal, bully, lie, and cheat on their spouses. And based on yesterday's election, I understand most of you in North Dakota, that's what you want. Okay, well, that's what you're going to get. That's exactly what you're going to get. Less property rights. By the end of the next 4 years, you might not even be able to farm. You might have to check in with Senator Hoeven and Senator Kramer and Kelly Armstrong and a few others that run the state before you can even plant a seed. Think I'm crazy? Go ask anybody who's fighting Summit Carbon Solutions right now how their property rights are doing. Go ask anybody who's fighting against corporations in the farming world how their rights are doing right now. And then see where the politicians land. Because they're not in favor of the people. They're not in favor of the taxpayer. Nope. They're in favor of the rich people. In favor of the rich corporations. In favor of the big old subsidy train that drives right up to their front door. I mean, when you take a look at it, in all honesty, folks, this would be a fantastic story to do. Where does North Dakota rank when it comes to ESG, environmental, social governance? I would bet you an extraordinary amount of money or an extraordinarily humiliating thing. Like, I'm very confident when I say this next statement. North Dakota has to be a top 5 ESG state. Has to be. Might even be top 3. When you take a look at what ESG is and why they give out money for ESG, like the whole immigration program that Ron Ness did with the Petroleum Council, 100% ESG. 100% ESG. But what Ron Ness did with the Petroleum Council was he took the money, did as little as possible, but hired Brent Sanford as a lobbyist. So they'll take the money, not do what they're supposed to do, use what they have to, but then use as much as they can to go ahead and pursue their own special interests. So it's increasing our taxes, increasing our inflation, and causing problems at the state level. It's actually the worst thing you can do. It's the literal worst thing you can do. If you took the money and applied it to the actual problem, well, you might have a fix. But if you take the money, throw as little as possible, and then use the rest so that you can pursue your own special interests and your own side hustle, well, that's outright abuse. But not in North Dakota. It's not. And yesterday's election reflects that. My name is Jason Speece. You're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. More election coverage, analysis, recaps, etc. coming right here on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
News Talk Bismarck and Mandan. Super Talk 1270. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Speece. Thank you, folks, for joining us here today. Getting back to our election coverage here, our election recap and analysis and reaction, if you will. Talking about some of the different races across the state. First segment, we talked about the different measures that went through. And really the takeaway from the measures is how much the English language has changed. When you take a look at like the property tax measure, when they use words like political subdivision and unindebted and these number of things, those are all barriers, hurdles, obstacles, and roadblocks between the basic language of saying we don't want to pay property taxes anymore. And because there's political subdivisions in the way now, and there's unindebtedness, forgiveness in the way now, there's all these different things to where your politicians have to come in and say, and your lawyers have to come in and say, oh, no, you got to word it this way. Because what happens if a duck flies in and lays an egg? You got, I mean, come on now. I mean, they'll come out with these types of ridiculous fear-mongering situations so that they'll change the law, so that you end up with measures that read so you don't understand them, so you have to rely on them. That's part of the strategy, remember. Yesterday's election, in a very big part, was done so you have to continue to rely on the politicians. So a lot of the people you just elected are literally on purpose going in to create problems. They're literally going in to create gridlock. They're literally going in to try to disrupt the system. And a lot of those people are funded by special interests. By special interests. So, I mean, I think there's more political nonprofits now than actual nonprofits. Like what a nonprofit was originally meant to be, help the homeless. Homeless population keeps going up, so we'll start another nonprofit that's just a lobbyist group. Okay. My favorite title I've ever seen is from Ben Hansen. You know Ben Hansen from West Fargo? He ran against Ben Hansen. That's right. Ben Hansen with a beard ran against Ben Hansen with a beard, and they were both in their mid-30s. I mean, you can't make that up. Ben Hansen, the Democrat from Fargo, he used to have a job, and his title was Director of Homelessness. I didn't know if it was insulting or it was lazy or it was edgy. I mean, Director of Homelessness. That's one of the most bizarre titles I've ever heard in my life from a man who comes from a privileged family. Love it. Love it. I took just can't make it up today, folks. So let's get to our next topic here. And, I do want to circle back to that legacy fund. Remember Measure 3, limiting the spending from the legacy fund? Ends up being actually the closest ballot measure, 52-48%, something like that, very close. About 1,000 separating the two in terms of where it comes from. But if passed, the measure, and I believe it did pass, the measure would limit spending by the legislator from 5% from the current 15%. So, to 5% from the current 15%. And that's an interesting one. We're gonna dive into that one in the future, folks, because that is gonna disrupt some projections that a lot of people who had that money earmarked for the legacy fund. I know that was one of the big rumors why Doug Burgum ran for governor, was because of the legacy fund. He wanted to tap into the legacy fund. One of the reasons why it was created, one of the rumors, was so that Senator Hoeven would have this endless slush fund that he could use from all the time. And 15% of billions of dollars as a kind of a legacy fund, if you will, that you can use from because you control. Because if you're a Republican in the state of North Dakota, you get a flat 63% of the vote across the state on the low end. That's quite a bit of money. So that's what that is. It goes from 15 down to 5% on the legacy fund. And Superintendent Kirsten Basler, 16,000 vote lead over Jason Heitkamp for the public instruction race, the superintendent of public instruction. And I'm pretty sure that we can go ahead and call that one as well. And circling back to the Measure 5, that's the recreational cannabis. We take a look at the surrounding states. Montana has recreational cannabis. South Dakota's got medical. They did pass a recreational. They kind of kicked the can a little bit, if you will. I believe next year is when it's going to go recreational. Minnesota in the spring goes recreational. And then, of course, you have Canada. North Dakota is losing out on a big opportunity here when it comes to a lot of the financial implications of it. But there's also some medical stuff, because this shows, once again, North Dakota continues to build that bridge back to the 18th century. And the colleges are going to suffer because of this. They're going to suffer because of this. They're going to have to make laws. They're going to have to make rulings. It's going to be a problem. If students from North Dakota State and University of North Dakota, which overwhelmingly voted yes on the measure to pass, can just pop over to Moorhead or East Grand Forks to a dispensary in the spring, you don't think they're going to blaze up in their dorm rooms? You don't think that it's going to be a lot more lackadaisical the way that they start smoking? Fargo and Grand Forks are going to become very inundated with the smell of cannabis as soon as Minnesota goes recreational, as soon as South Dakota becomes recreational. Add Wahpeton to the list. So this discrimination that the small group of people have in North Dakota against marijuana really needs to be called out. It's not going to stop. That's obvious. It's obvious. But the amount of money they spend in order to shame people looking for medicine is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. It is so discriminatory, it's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. Like, in all honesty, it's just outright abusive and cruel. But hey, because you grew up in the 18th century where reefer madness controlled your life, you think it's cool and okay to use public money to shame people politically who are looking for medicine. It's actually quite sickening. It's cruel, abusive, and sickening. My name is Jason Spiess. It's the day after an election, folks, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess, sitting in for Steve Bakken. He is back tomorrow, I do believe. Getting back to some of the results from yesterday's election, Josh Gallion, 68% of the votes against Timothy Lamb. Josh Gallion, a Republican. State Auditor Timothy Lamb, the Democratic nominee. Again, 68%. I've said this before. If you're a Republican in North Dakota, you should count on at least 63% as your base. And honestly, the yardstick was this, that if you go back and take a look at the last 20 years, and then go look at the Ryan Rauschenberger election when he got the multiple DUIs and pot charge in office, that only cost him a couple points. That's it. I think he got 61% or something like that. And that told me a lot, that if you're a part of the Republican machine, not part of the Republican Party, because if you're not part of the machine, they can take you out in the primary. But if you're part of the machine, you get about 63% of the vote. And going ahead and take a look at Thomas Beadle, he got 98% of the vote. And he was campaigning on social media like this was a tight race. Well, it turns out he's not running against anybody. Okay, well, there you go. There's a man not to trust. All right, Insurance Commissioner John Gottfried. And is he married to Amanda Gottfried? I'd see that the Republican machine is testing her out now to be a media personality. They've been testing her out now for a couple of years, so I wouldn't be surprised if Amanda Gottfried becomes more political in the next few years now that her husband has been reelected. Public Service Commissioner Randy Chrisman, 69% of the vote. Public Superintendent, Super Nintendo of Public Instruction, Kirsten Baszler, 56% of the vote against Jason Heitkamp, 42%. Wow. A little bit closer than one would have thought on that. And when we take a look at, let's see, do we have the statewide races here? Not in this one. Okay. All right, here's the Burleigh County. All right, folks. County Commissioner at large, Burleigh County. Precincts fully in, 30 out of 30. Steve Bakken, my co-host, I should say the host of this show, and I'm the special co-host a couple times a week. Steve Bakken gets the most votes, 29%, with 23,000 and some change. Brian Bittner receives 26% of the vote, 21,000 and some change of the votes. Amelia Dahl got 25%, and Gregory Heilman with 19% of the vote. 477 write-ins. That's an extraordinary amount of write-ins. Bart Simpson, Beavis, Butthead, those were the popular write-ins back in my day. I don't know. I suppose Rick and Morty would probably be popular today. I imagine some kind of Shazizzle would probably be in there. Okay. Should we take a look at Kidder County, folks? Let's take a look at Kidder County here. I'm trying to hit some of the Bismarck proper, if you will, some of the ones that might be a little bit more impactful. We'll do Oliver next as well. Nicholas Fries with 57% of the vote. Dan Middledeer, pronounced that incorrectly, I'm quite sure, 40% of the vote. County Commissioner is Nicholas Fries. And let's see, where else? We said Oliver County, right? That's where we're going to go next? Is that right? Oliver County. Spent a week there one night. Oh, hi-yo. All right. Dave Berger, 31% of the vote. Robert Schmidt with 26% of the vote. They're your two winners. Darrell Berger got 22% of the vote, and Blake Wilkins with 20% of the vote. Write-ins only got 9. See, there's only 9 write-ins in Oliver County. What did I say at Burleigh or Wilkins, whatever? Not Wilkins. Wilkins County. That's Minnesota. What am I talking about? Emmons County. We can go down to Emmons County, not Sioux County. You know, sometimes trying to navigate this is a little bit difficult, but Morton County. That's what I meant to say, Morton County. I didn't mean to say all those other counties. Nathan Bohm, 36%, 35% of the vote, and Paul Tokak, 32%, and Raymond Morrell, depends on if it's a mushroom or if it's a hot dog, Raymond Morrell, with 31% of the vote. And then just, they're the only three running. They're the ones that won. And so there you go. Not much drama there, folks, since you already knew ahead of time. But the Home Rule Charter Amendment 30, that did pass 60%. So there you go, folks. And one more county let's take a look at here. Why don't we take a look at Mercer? What happened in Mercer County yesterday, folks? There was an at-large county commissioner bid. 4 people on the ballot. Travis Frey got the lowest amount of votes, 19%. Neil Seibel, 23% of the vote, second lowest. Now, here's your 2 winners. This was really a terrible way to read. I thought I'd do something different and go from the bottom up, but I'll just go from the top down. So, Casey Lee Voigt, 30% of your vote, top vote getter for Mercer County, and Mark Pierce with 23.8% of the vote got second place. He's also a county commissioner at large for Mercer County. 2 of them elected, Casey Lee Voigt, Mark Pierce in Mercer County. So why is this important? Well, we have a lot going on. Jason Isaac, who's been a regular on this program down in Texas, he's with the Carbon Institute or some kind of energy institute. He's the Carbon King, is what he's known as, the Carbon King, because he goes and he testifies against carbon regulations before Congress, and he mentioned all the things he uses in his day-to-day life, from his car to his toaster to just everything that uses carbon. And so they jokingly called him the Carbon King. Well, he wrote an article over the weekend that talks about the project in South Dakota, and he commends the people in South Dakota for going to the polls and taking care of the landowner's Bill of Rights, which actually has nothing to do with landowner rights. Again, more of that language to trick you, so you have to rely on the lobbyists, the lawyers, and the politicians. It's not a 1-2 punch, it's a 1-2-3 punch. And ironically, the lawyers are the less culpable in this. They're just being used for the language and how to do different things. Sometimes you have a lobbyist that's a lawyer and a politician. That's a 3-peat dirtbag right there. That's right. He's a 3-peater right there. He can ruin your day all wrapped into one person right there. That's like a person that low needs a ladder to touch a snake's belly. Yeah. If you're a lawyer, a lobbyist, and a politician all wrapped into one person, that's like scum pond right there, folks. You bet. Looks like we got to hit our top of the hour news. My name is Jason Spiess, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Talk of the Town, weekday mornings starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. Without apology, The Regular Joe Show with Joe Gigante. Weekday evenings at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app.
Portions of the following program are pre-recorded.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess, sitting in for Steve Bakken here for a couple segments. We're going to head down to South Dakota to talk about emergency management, some of the things happening down there in the world of virtual reality. It's coming this way, folks. It's coming this way. All right, let's head down to Pennington County, South Dakota. Emergency management, a little bit of fire
training going on, actually fire prevention training, emergency management training. And folks, as you know, we've been following the world of virtual reality over the past year. And what's happening is a lot of emergency management, a lot of mining. We've had discussions about manufacturing down on the floor are getting involved with virtual reality for training. Last month, Clint Kling with Shepherd VR, who's going to be on in just a moment. We talked about how the military was getting into virtual reality through mental health, meaning psychology or psychological issues and psychology, mental health when it comes to suicide prevention. So the world of virtual reality is going in a lot of different directions. Clint Kling has been on the ground floor of it, has done a project with the Black Mines of South Dakota State. I'm not sure what the official name of that university is anymore, as I didn't have my notes in front of me, so I do apologize. But let's bring Clint Kling in here, as well as Adam Davis. Adam Davis is with Pennington County, South Dakota, Emergency Management. Clint, how you doing today?
Doing well. Jason, how you been?
Hey, not too bad. Mr. Adam Davis, how about you?
Doing real good, thank you.
Now, the two of you just concluded an emergency management conference, training session, something along those lines, and virtual reality was used. Clint, go ahead and just kind of set the table. And then, Adam, my understanding is you are a user of the virtual reality. So after Clint sets the table, I'll have you kind of take the baton and explain what you went through. So, Clint, what did you set up down there for the individuals down in Pennington County?
Thanks, Jason. We were trying to go through a VR simulation of the fire extinguisher systems that are handheld. The PASS acronym is something that's widely used in fire extinguisher training. Also, kind of understanding how fire works, and then types of fires that can be used with fire extinguishers as well. And Adam and his team, they do trainings or helps out with trainings here in Pennington County with fire extinguishers. And so we decided to look at the VR system to see if, this could be an option for some of the clients out there or people wanting to use fire extinguishers. Some days, the handheld systems or the physical systems do not work on rainy days or cold weather days. So maybe the VR system could be a substitute, or maybe altogether it would be something preferable. And so Adam, having a background with safety and training and also virtual reality, went through the system and was giving feedback and helping us, essentially develop even a better product for customers.
When you say, and Adam, I'll have you take the baton in a second here, but when you say handheld, do you mean like handheld for virtual reality or like handheld fire extinguisher?
Handheld for virtual reality. Like there was no physical fire extinguisher device. It was just using the VR goggles and hand controllers with that.
Okay, that's when you say handheld, it's more the controllers then. Okay. And that was what I was wondering. So, you're in this virtual reality simulation, Adam. Talk to me, like, what should I expect on something like that? I think a lot of people are not even skeptical. They just don't know what to think, if that makes sense. Huh.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, and so I've only been with the county since January of this year. Before this, I spent about 15 and a half years doing helicopter search and rescue and really, involved in the instructional side of that, teaching as a senior instructor. And one of the tools that we used heavily in that was we leverage virtual reality, for a lot of our training. The company that I worked for, previously, we developed a lot of our own. So I've got a pretty good appreciation for, how virtual reality, just as a technology set, can be leveraged in a whole myriad of different safety trainings, be it from teaching people how to do hoist rescue out of the back of a helicopter to, doing really good awareness training with fire extinguishers, as Clint demoed for me today with his system. So, there's going to be people that struggle with the leap and the concept of utilizing technology versus going outside and starting a fire and using an actual fire extinguisher to put it out. It takes a little bit of a level of faith for new and uninitiated, especially potentially when you're dealing with a little bit of an older demographic in some situations where they're not used to using technology as an everyday tool to help us, do things in a lot of cases, more efficiently and at a lower price point, especially if this is something you're paying for. So, what Clint demoed for me with his system today was, it was a great demonstration of the use of technology, where if you get a potential commercial client or customer, someone who doesn't have the time or capacity to take all their staff members, for example, out and do physical hands-on live fire training, if their objective is to teach fire extinguisher awareness and concepts, utilization of virtual reality is an absolute tool that involves immersion and development of critical memory items, as well as at least the starting point of some muscle memory development, that they can do in an enclosed office space, for example, and typically at a much faster pace than if you're having to refill actual fire extinguishers or reset or relight live fires, things like that add and take a lot more time to accomplish.
Mr. Adam Davis of the Pennington County, South Dakota Emergency Management Team, and Clint Kling with Shepherd VR. The VR is for virtual reality. Hold that thought. We're going to take a brief pause. When we come back, I want to have some more conversation about virtual reality training, how it's saving lives and making the world much more safe out there. My name is Jason Spiess, and this is Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess, sitting in here for one more segment for Steve Bakken. We're going to head back down to South Dakota, talk about virtual reality and emergency management training. Adam Davis is with the Pennington County Emergency Management Team, and Clint Kling is with Shepherd VR, the individual that does the construction of the virtual reality training program. Emergency management, of course, you're talking about flight or flight situations. You're talking about real impact decisions, life and death. And one of the most amazing, and I actually mean amazing, because I was blown away by this thread of the virtual reality that I've discussed over the past year, was actually, I think it was last month after the NFL draft. The second overall pick, Jaden Daniels, who went to the Washington Commanders. He was at Louisiana State University. He went from like a 6th round pick to second overall. And he attributes a lot of it to virtual reality. And the takeaway, which is the part that I just found amazing, was he talked about how he could slow the game down. And of course, I thought of Muhammad Ali. I thought of Ty Cobb. I thought of Pete Rose. All these greats in sports that talk about how they can see the ball coming in 5 miles an hour instead of 95 miles an hour. They can see the seams on the football before they catch it. Just the game slows down, but in real time. So when I hear that in virtual reality, and I hear Jaden Daniels talking about that in sports, immediately I think of emergency management, how, my goodness, if it works in sports, I can't imagine when you're, something burning and falling from the sky is happening, and a number of different life and death type of situations. So Has that crossed your mind, Adam, at all? And Clint, we've talked about this as well, but Adam, has that crossed your mind about how virtual reality can slow time down in real time so that your mind can actually be ahead of what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly saw that again with my background in utilizing VR for teaching helicopter rescue stuff. I mean, I saw that demonstrated on a regular, reoccurring basis where, students, once they would go through a course of learning, it really, I don't know about, per se slowing time down as a concept, but the idea that they're not surprised by what they're seeing because they've been through it before, basically. And, I have long said, and again, as Clint addressed, I've been involved with or utilizing VR for many, many years now in a professional application of teaching. And I would never say that VR is going to be 100% replacement for live training. But it maximizes one's ability. Anytime we look at the human mind and we understand that some things have shock value. So you just, Jason, described some, situations that would have shock value if you'd never seen it. I think you referenced like things, fire falling from the sky or something like that, right? Like that's going to have a shock factor, which tends to make people have a bit of a lockup response a lot of times because the human mind becomes overwhelmed. So what I've seen with my background, and not necessarily just emergency management per se, because emergency management is literally just that. Like we help manage large scale emergencies, whereas it's our firefighters and our police officers and other responders that are out dealing with the actual shock and awe type situations. But what I've learned and what I appreciate from this system is that anytime we can pre-introduce someone to a scenario, an event. So if and when they do experience that in real life, it's not the first time they've seen it. Maybe we have already perfectly recreated that in a virtual environment, but at the very least, they have already achieved those goals. They've done those tasks. They've seen those different elements. And it has started to become normalized in their mind through safe virtual training. So when they do encounter it in an actual setting, it's more normalized. It allows them to respond more calmly, and understand, whatever their standard checklist is. So here today, with Clint's VR system that he demoed for me, we were talking about the simple, PASS acronym for how to use a fire extinguisher: point, aim, squeeze, and sweep. So when a student goes through that in a virtual environment where it's really structured from a good educational setup, kind of the concept of I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So after, 15 minutes in this VR module, even, just that short amount of time, there's already this fundamental understanding of, okay, I know this acronym and I remember this acronym. And if nothing else, that's my takeaway. So if I were to have to go, pull out a fire extinguisher and put out an actual fire, I've been through this in this nice, safe, controlled environment that was a structured educational format. So, from a learning standpoint, it was taught in a manner that we know most adult learners are going to have some pretty decent retention from, and have a higher opportunity to effectively apply those skills in an actual situation. But when I took this person who had spent a week in VR and on a physical tower, but developing these critical memory items and critical muscle memories, and then I threw them in the back of a helicopter, and it was like they had been doing it for, it was like they had been training for months. Like they were familiar with it. They adapted to it. So that's just my own use case of having a very, initially a very negative attitude about it. This is years and years ago, but becoming a believer, becoming an advocate in the system. And so I have shared that story with many times when I have had older students, older generation who had a similar negative attitude about it and walked in and said, "Oh, this is just a silly video game." Through good learning techniques teaching techniques and styles and a slow integrated application at the end of sessions, I've had people that were initially naysayers, older demographic people that were naysayers, come out saying, "Wow, this is a pretty incredible tool." And it actually does serve a place in our worlds.
Adam Davis, Pennington County Emergency Management Staff. Clint Kling, Shepherd VR. Thank you so much for your time today. We got to hit the break, folks. When we come back, more Talk of the Town.
Talk Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spee, sitting in for Steve Bakken as we get into the home stretch here. Jared Walker with Carbon Vert is our special guest. Let's head right back to the interview. What do you attribute the rapid rise of the carbon management industry? That's been around for a long time. There were, a lot of subsidies, and whether it went towards solar or wind or some of the other renewable classifications of energy. There's been a lot of, government assistance and resources put in the last 30, 40 years. The last 2 years, it's a totally different ball game. What do you attribute the rapid rise of this carbon management industry to?
Well, I think it's 100% the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. When they moved that needle up from $50 a ton to $85 a ton for pure storage of CO2, that crossed the barrier for a lot of industries. Before the $50 a ton, you probably got ammonia and ethanol were the only ones who could do it and still make not lose money doing it at that rate. Now 85, you're now getting most of the other industries in. Direct air capture, that's a completely different ballgame. They're at 180, and that's still too low for them. They're just so expensive to do that filtering of pure air. But yeah, the $85 a ton move, that was the move that set off the industry. And like you said, there used to be a couple of us out there doing it, and now there's one at every corner. It seems like there's a lot of people out there with the carbon on their name. So,
what I find interesting about this whole movement and this rapid rise and everything is we've had a couple individuals that have gotten into the market, and I'd say they're, relatively new, meaning their company's probably less than 5 years old. You've been in it for 20 years. You're a veteran in this industry. What they've said is that it's a difficult industry to crack because it's all driven from the government. And when you just said the Inflation Reduction Act is driving a lot of this, and then I'm thinking about how a lot of the, public-private partnerships, or whether it be the Department of Energy, Carbon Management Division. I see Colorado now has a Carbon Management Division. It's actually lumped in with oil and gas. There seems to be some chatter, if not credence, to a lot of this industry is being ignited by the government in some form or another. What's your experience with those comments coming from some of the new businesses that are trying to crack in?
Sure. So as with any business you want to take off, you have to have a driver, right? A motivation. Before there was a small industrial need for CO2. There was the enhanced oil recovery market, which was quite small, and they got most of their CO2 from natural pools of CO2 under the ground. So it wasn't a big cost to them to pull it out. And then there was your food industry for dry ice and your pops and beers and carbonated beverages. But that is such a small percentage of the actual CO2 that's out there that market alone could not drive the capture of CO2 from all of these different sources. And so, yeah, the government did have to step in. It had to be a carrot or a stick. They've tried the stick in other instances, the SOX and NOx. They decided to try the carrot here. So they decided to give us a tax credit. And give us some motivation that way to move this forward. And because of that, it's sparked a lot of interest because now people can make a little money with these tax credits that come back, and it can be a moneymaker for a lot of people. as I say, you have to be in the black to go green. So kind of the driver for anything.
Is there a stick coming? I mean, carrot and stick. What's the stick?
Well, I mean, California's done both, right? So California, of course, has done the carrot and stick. They put their stick out there first and said, you must reduce your carbon emissions. And they said, and here's our carbon market. And they have a completely separate market for that. They actually have a trading scheme where people can grab CO2 by the ton and sell it to someone else who needs it. And it's a bit of a mess, but you know, they do have the stick, they have the bottom, the threshold, and then they give you the perk on top if you can do it better.
So we're joined by Jared Walker with Carbon Vert, V-E-R-T, Carbon Vert. Who's your customer? Who are you trying to go after? What type of carbon management are you going to, because there's like niches now in carbon management. Like you said before, there was like a handful of companies probably that really understood it and did it. But now it's like a whole new industry's opened up. So, you know, who's your customer and what's your area of expertise in the Carbon Vert world?
Yeah, so we go after most emitters, sources of CO2 who don't have a place to store it on site or nearby is really who we're going after. And the source itself doesn't matter as much to us because there's ways of separating the CO2 out of almost any of the processes now. In certain times, we will take on the separation and the compression ourselves. We'll take that, you know, people will just say, hey, here's my stack where all my emissions are coming out. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees and send it over the fence to you and you take care of it, and we'll take care of that. Other times they'll compress it, clean it up, and send us pure CO2 over so we can take care of it from that point. We'll put it in a pipeline, take it off to our storage hubs. Right now our current projects are offshore, just offshore in Louisiana and Texas. So that's a nice area to be in because there's a lot of the NIMBY, right? Not under my backyard type of mentality out there where everyone wants to do something nice, but just not near me. And so if we go offshore a little bit, we can get it under the ground where no one's nearby. We can still safely store it, monitor it, and it just makes it a nicer area for everyone. There's a lot of room out there too, a lot of room where no one's doing anything. So that's kind of our play. We take it and we get paid to store it and monitor it, transport it, and it's sometimes even compress and clean it up.
Not in my backyard. That was what was mentioned just yesterday in the North Dakota Energy Transmission meeting from one of the regulators. They felt that some of the objection for the pipeline that's going through North Dakota was NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yep.
And that, of course, is, you know, that becomes a political statement and that sort of thing. But at the same time, there's a history with wind turbines. There's a history with coal. There's a history with, well, anything that's going to take out your sunset and your sunrise and then that sort of thing. So where I'm from on the east side of North Dakota, west side of Minnesota, NIMBY always came up with wind turbines. Didn't matter. And hog plants, that was another one, hog plants. Nobody wanted to be near a hog plant. So you're finding out that is starting to be the case in some of these carbon management projects, or is that mostly just some of the sources, if you will?
Well, you see it with the pipeline. They've already killed one pipeline, and the problem is that, you know, the whole NIMBY is the same way. If you don't see value for what's going on, especially when it comes to the government taking your land or enforcing themselves, which a lot of people do not care for, you have to see value there. You have to say this is for the greater good of everyone. And if you don't believe that's what's going on is for the greater good of everyone, then, you know, you're going to push back against it. And there will always be people who will make up safety concerns or other concerns where there probably isn't as big a risk as they would like you to think. And that stirs a lot of this up.
Jared Walker, hold that thought. One more segment to go here on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town with Steve Bakken. My name is Jason Spee, sitting in for Steve for one more segment. Jared Walker is our guest with Carbon Vert. You're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
1270. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spieth, sitting in for Steve Bakken. One more segment. Let's go back to the interview with Jared Walker with Carbon Vert. Carbon management, carbon sequestration, carbon storage on site at ethanol plants. Jared Walker is our guest. We'll go right back to the interview.
Not in my backyard. That was what was mentioned just yesterday in the North Dakota Energy Transmission meeting from one of the regulators. They felt that some of the objection for the pipeline that's going through North Dakota was NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yep.
And that, of course, is, that becomes a political statement and that sort of thing. But at the same time, there's a history with wind turbines. There's a history with coal. There's a history with, anything that's going to take out your sunset and your sunrise and that sort of thing. So where I'm from on the east side of North Dakota, west side of Minnesota, NIMBY always came up with wind turbines. Didn't matter. And hog plants, that was another one, hog plants. Nobody wanted to be near a hog plant. So you're finding out that is starting to be the case in some of these carbon management projects, or is that mostly just some of the sources, if you will?
Well, you see with the pipeline, they've already killed one pipeline. And the problem is that, the whole NIMBY is the same way. If you don't see value for what's going on, especially when it comes to the government taking your land or enforcing themselves, which a lot of people do not care for, you have to see value there. You have to say this is for the greater good of everyone. And if you don't believe that's what's going on is for the greater good of everyone, then, you're going to push back against it. And there will always be people who will make up safety concerns or other concerns where there probably isn't as big a risk as they would like you to think. And that stirs a lot of this up. So.
That's the one thing about the future. Nobody's wrong. Anybody can speculate and project and predict and have fear. But, it's how you choose to interpret the fear or the future is up to you. And so that's why sports shouting and political talk shows do so well. You're just talking about the future all the time. My favorite is, this is really noticeable during the NFL draft season, is when you listen to I call them sports shouting, the guys who just try to, I'm more right than you about whether Brett Favre is a better Packer or a better Viking, that type of guys. And what's interesting is this during the draft time, and it's really accelerated since COVID because everybody and their cat has a podcast. In fact, Will Ferrell's most successful podcast is by Ron Burgundy, and he's not even a real person. So that just shows you how that world works. But these individuals who just research online and then they pass it off as fact, and they talk about how Bill Belichick's going to draft this person and Andy Reid's going to draft this person and Jim Harbaugh is going to draft this person and the Chicago Bears are going to draft this person. And then when they're wrong, they actually spend a week trying to spin it why Andy Reid was wrong and why the Chicago Bears were wrong. They get so caught up and invested in their own spin and their speculation that they don't understand the reality. And so a lot of that I do believe is carbon related because there are some issues down in, Startel? What's the name of that town in Mississippi where they had an incident?
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the town, but I know the incident you're talking about.
Yeah, I always say Sartell, but that's a suburb out of Minneapolis, and that's my cousins live there, so I get mixed up. And then there's Sulphur, Louisiana. They just had a carbon leak as well. You do things on site. Have you? Is that a preferred method? Is that? I know there needs to be a certain geology underneath. Talk to me a little bit about how you have to have a couple things lined up in order to do what you're doing. Because isn't that right? You're doing on site, and the geology needs to be okay underneath.
That's correct. So the on-site, as my previous project, the on-site geology has to be right. So there's a couple things you have to look at. Number one, you have to be deep enough that the CO2 stays in a supercritical form. You take CO2 in an air form, it's in the air, and it's about 1 ton, about the size of a swimming pool, Olympic-sized swimming pool. You compress it down to that liquid phase, that fluid phase, and it's about the size of a bathtub. So your space savings is tremendous just to compress it up there. So you have to have something deep enough that the pressure in the earth is above 1,200 psi. That's usually about 2,600 feet in the ground. The other thing you have to have is a rock that will accept it. So a sandstone. You go to the beach, you pick up some sand, you can dump water in it runs through. Same thing happens on the earth. There's sand down there. You can push CO2 and it just sort of flows into it. And then above that, you've got to have a rock that's going to hold it in place. So that's your seal. And that's usually a shale, clay-bound thing. It's like, all your plates that are fired clay, they're meant to hold water and hold fluids. So the same thing. You have a great big piece of sandstone, and above it you have a piece of clay that holds it in place, and then that allows that CO2 to go in there and percolate into that sandstone and stay there indefinitely.
Has there ever been a spill, a leak? Has there ever been a leak on site? In my mind, when I was a kid, I remember there was a theory with the dinosaurs where there would be certain, burps or cracks in the earth where some CO2 would come out, and then the dinosaurs would walk along and all, they would just collapse and right there on the spot. You're talking 2,500 feet down in the Earth's surface and that sort of thing. That would take like an earthquake or a sinkhole that you didn't know about underneath the deal. So has there ever been like an incident where, it's cracked up and I call it a carbon burp. Has there ever been a carbon burp on these on-site places?
Oh, not on the on-site places that there are very few out there actually doing this right now, correct? So there's not, but the technical work that has to go in before you put a project in is immense. The EPA and these class 6 wells, the type of well you need to inject CO2. You have to do seismic studies to make sure there's no faults in the area. You have to make sure there's no old wells that might be paths to come up. You have to make sure there's no fracture zones. You just have to really do some real homework before they'll give you the okay to store CO2. So that's why it hasn't happened. Now, in the past, okay, you talk about the Mississippi, that was actually a pipeline. That was a landslide where, Earth actually moved and broke it. So that wasn't really the pipeline's fault. But there have been times in West Texas, they do a lot of EOR, enhanced oil recovery, where they're pushing CO2 in to get more oil out of the ground. And, sometimes those guys don't do the same type of wells that we're talking about doing in our projects. And there has been times when CO2 will come up not through the well, not through cracks in the earth or anything, but just through the wells, and they'll have to go out there and stop it and go in there and plug it off some cement, and it's all good. They can fix those fairly easily. So that's the only real, leak problems you've ever really had in the industry.
All right, Jared Walker, Carbon Vert. Hey, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Folks, that's going to do it for Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees. Thank you very much for listening. Sitting in for Steve Bakken. He's back tomorrow here on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Talk of the Town, weekday mornings starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app.